see. Here we go. Welcome back to Defining Moments podcast. My name is Wong Lam, and today's very special guest is the captain of the Missoula County Sheriff's Department, Missoula County, Montana, Captain Burt. Welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. I remember watching some live. I'm a live PD fan. My wife is too, and we obviously have watched for the last 3 years, and saw some episodes with you on. And every time I fly to my brother's house in Washington State, off to the right of the map in Montana, I see Missoula, and so I was like, "Hey, that'd be kind of cool if I could ever meet up with the captain himself." This is the second best thing, so here we are.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
The whole PD thing has been a lot of fun. It's was not anything like I expected. Those the TV crews that are out here riding around with us are incredibly professional people. They really know their jobs well, and it was surprising to me to see and find out how much they actually know about what we do. Did a really good job of staying out of the way, recognizing dangerous situations, not putting themselves and getting themselves in the middle of what we're doing. So it's really been while they were here, it was a great partnership, and it was really a positive experience overall for our office and for our community.
That's awesome. Well, that leads to a question I've been curious about. So it's a two-part question. The first part of it is, what's a misconception about law enforcement? It's 2020. I feel like there's misconceptions out there. What's a couple misconceptions that you can identify?
It depends on the context in which you're asking that question, but it really is not that us versus them. I think the greatest thing that this show probably portrays is it kind of humanizes the badge that the vast majority of people all across this country that are doing this type of work are really in it for the right reasons. They're trying to make their community safer. They really are there to protect and serve. They really are there for public safety reasons. It isn't to fulfill some ego. It isn't to go out and hurt people. It isn't to make people's lives more miserable. Unfortunately, the situations that are we see with social media or even the regular media are those that are the unusual, but they're the ones that are always broadcast, and those are the stories that are always told. The humanizing stories are the ones that are less likely told. People that are cops are people, and they have all the exact same problems that everybody else has. We have people in our families that are drug addicts, alcoholics, that run into problems with the law. Those are emotional, and those are real problems that we face, but can't really bring that into what we're doing every day, and have to try to keep that separate and try to keep our emotions out of that. That's the big scale thing. And some of the smaller misconceptions is that they're really, the whole concept and the idea behind the thin blue line. Law enforcement's changed a lot in the almost 30 years that I've been involved, and what that means, the thin blue line means today, is a lot different from what it was in the past. And there might have been, where there wasn't as much oversight and social media wasn't out there. I don't think that corruption is really not a part of any type of modern day law enforcement. The people that are doing this job have good moral compasses and are people of character and integrity, and there's always the exception, but we're out here for the right reasons.
Yeah.
The office that I'm currently involved with, the sheriff's office, I've been with Missoula for about 15 years now, and I'll just say that they're some of the not as far as cops go, but as far as people, they're some of the finest men and women I've ever known.
That's awesome. Speaking of thin blue line, I got to reach over here and grab something real quick. So I'll get your address here. Well, I have your address, but we'll be sending you one of our official Defining Moments podcast t-shirts.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And I'll get your size a little bit. And then also we have our special edition Thin Blue Line Defining Moments hat.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So we'll be sending you those in the mail here in the next couple of days.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Actually, we thank you and thank you for the services you do for the country, your community, obviously. And do you feel like with Live PD bringing a more humanized perspective to law enforcement, how has that helped your community?
Uh, I think one of the reasons that, and I can't totally speak for the network. In fact, I can't speak for them at all. But I think one of the reasons that they liked Missoula is it was a fresh perspective to the different types of law enforcement that actually occur. A lot of the stuff that you see are people running and gunning and chasing car chases and dog bites and the excitement. But I think we brought something a little different to it with some of. We have all of that. There's no question. I can match up call for call anything that anybody's gone through. I mean, some of the most horrific things. But we get some pretty unique calls as well with our search and rescue units and the amount of wildlife, bears in houses, sneaking into somebody's car, getting into their porch, deer who get their antlers locked up in different things. And so the wildlife brings a whole different aspect to it. What we've been able to do, what Live PD did for us, and what we've been able to do through Live PD is show a little bit of that to the world. Because I mean, I have people that follow me and that I'm in communication with from everywhere that see this show and recognize that we're just a little bit different than everybody else that has been that's been highlighted or been on the program.
Yeah. And you're right. The wildlife pictures that you tweet are actually really awesome because obviously I follow you on Twitter. And then more recently, the last few weeks, month and a half, your tweets every day talking about being a part of something, part of life, a part of the day, being great. I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I've recognized early on that there was an opportunity through social media. I had Twitter for a while, but I never used it before Live PD. And so all of a sudden, I mean, that really exploded from 1 to 2 followers to over 12,000 in a relatively short period of time, and really realized that was a great way to reach out and stay connected with people and continue to humanize the badge and be able to answer most questions in a more direct manner. And I've had Facebook for a long time, and I wasn't utilizing the power of Facebook for that, but it's been a great way to connect with not just our community members, but people from all across the country.
Yeah. We feel honored that you've given us the time of day here in Oklahoma to do this podcast with you.
I'm honored that you asked me to do it. I'm humbled to do it. It's with the minute I heard about it, I jumped on board right away. I was glad to be part of it.
This is awesome. Yeah. So as far as the misconception, we talked about that and how the Live PD has brought a different perspective to your community, how you actually gain traction and use your platform to educate us, the general public, about Missoula County. So what's a good place to eat in Missoula County?
Oh my gosh. I've had an opportunity to do some dignitary protection over the past 4 or 5 years with the election leading up to Donald Trump being elected. So Bernie Sanders was in town. The president was here a couple years ago, rallying support for one of the state candidates. And so I've had an opportunity to work a lot with the Secret Service people, and those folks are always, they're jumping ahead on wherever the next venue is going to be, or they're staying behind cleaning up from the last one. So they get around quite a bit, and I've had an opportunity to bring them to some of the different restaurants around Missoula, and the one that really stands out is a place called the Depot, where it's more of a fine dining type of place. You can get a little bit of everything there, but I'm always telling people that come here, that if you go to the depot, you will get a prime rib that you will never forget. It'll be just about the best chunk of meat that you're ever going to taste. I think a lot of people go into that with doubts, and they come out of there absolutely convinced.
That's awesome. I love steak. Beef is what's for dinner for me. I love it.
It's incredible. It's not Missoula. I guess there's a lot of diversity in Missoula. A lot of different places that the Cafe Rios and the chain type of things that are really good. But if you do get to Western Montana, my hometown of Butte's pretty unique for food. It's really not that far from here, but they have something from the mining days called a pasty, and they're a meat and potato filled type of in a dough that the miners would bring to work, and they're pretty. They've extended into Missoula, but it really is something that I don't want to say originated in Butte. It was kind of an Irish thing, but it really took off there. There's a lot of great restaurants in both Butte and Missoula.
Yeah. When you look back at your life, let's say 13, 14, 15 years ago, what's your journey like as far as from beginning to where you are now as the captain of the sheriff's office?
I there was a time early on. I was born and raised in Butte, and I was very interested in law enforcement from a very young age. Actually, about 4.5 years old, I knew what I wanted to do. I've shared with essentially the world now through Live PD and some of the interviews that a guy broke into our house when I was about 4.5 and attacked my mom, and it was a pretty terrifying experience. I remember quite a bit about it, even at that young of an age, and I still remember the feeling of relief, that the sensation of relief when the cops got there, the feeling of safety, and as time went on, I mean, even the following days and weeks, I mean, I looked up to them. I looked up to the cops. I mean, they were the guys that were going to get the guy that hurt my mom, and they were going to be the guys that were going to keep us safe. And I really was admired them. I mean, they were my heroes in that particular instance. As I grew up in that community, and I started getting through into my high school years and could start driving and getting around on my own, I started to develop relationships with some of the local police officers, and particularly there was 2 or 3 in particular that I was bugging every weekend. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go out and ride with them and spend as much time as I could. There was a time I would have done this job for free. It was great being out there. It was great from learning from these guys. I got into this pretty idealistic, thinking that you're going to save the world. Would only to find out that a lot of times you're equipped with a Band-Aid to take care of an arterial wound. It's a lot of things that are going on are significant problems that are going on in families that have taken weeks and months and even sometimes years to develop, and we have very short periods of time to come in and try to deal with that. And all we can really do is apply what the statute allows us to do what the law allows us to do. And then I think it's important to be able to be smart with your resources, understand what those are so that you can direct people to those. But I would say the biggest way that has changed in the years that I've been doing it, and I started my career in 1992, is that the amount of the different types of hats that you have to wear. In 1992, you wore the hat of a deputy sheriff, and you responded to calls, and you knew what your resources were, and you directed people to where they needed to go. Well, as things have developed, restrictions have gotten greater in schools about what teachers can do. Some of the group homes, they're really restricted. All they can do is call us. So you take on the role of parents are more afraid to discipline their kids because of if you spank your kid, you're going to go to jail. I mean, that's a misconception. That's not true, at least not in our state. So you've taken on the role, and you're wearing a lot of hats. You're a teacher, you're a counselor, you're somebody's clergy. It's everything falls back on the police. And with today's the rapid expansion of what we now call our mental health crisis in this country, a lot of that falls back on us too, to do assessments in the field, figure out where people are supposed to go or what we're supposed to do with them. There's even an expectation, a theory out there now that they want us to do some pre-arrest screening to figure out whether this person really needs to be arrested, or you need to get them into some type of other resource. Well, we don't always have those resources, and those resources aren't always available. Unfortunately, for a lot of things, the only thing that's really available to us is the jail. So you see this revolving problem of people going into the jail for disorderly conduct and minor issues, and then the courts are kicking them back out, and a day or two later they're back in for the same thing. And it's really a mental health issue. It's a problem that's out of law enforcement's hands to be able to deal with, but until somebody comes up with a real solution, we're not going to end up seeing an end to it. It is right now. It is our problem to deal with.
Yeah, you talked about how when it's the offenders that get released and then they reoffend, the recidivism rate is actually really high. It's like in high 80s or low 90s for them to repeat the crime.
Let me tell you, what was the question?
Oh, I was talking about the recidivism rate of a criminal coming out into the public and coming back into jail because of doing the same crime or another crime. The recidivism rate is really high, from what I understand.
And it's common in every community. There's a really good documentary out of Seattle called "Seattle is Dying," and it's a 1-hour documentary that just talks about they're referring to a homeless and a drug and alcohol problem that's going on in Seattle, but it's going on in every town in America. I mean, it depends on the size of your community as to how big the problem is. It's significant here in Missoula, considering the size of our population. But with the combination of drug and alcohol issues, along with mental illness, and not having enough resources, I mean, our jail has been a revolving door. We can't tie up and occupy every one of our beds, regardless of what you see on Live PD or elsewhere. If you look at the Uniform Crime Report from a year ago or 2 years ago, Missoula had the highest growth rate in violent crime of anywhere in the country. We have, for the last 7 or 8 years in a row, we have the highest suicide rate in the nation, the state of Montana, and Missoula is always at the top of in Montana. We have, when it comes to alcohol-related crashes, fatalities, we're way up at the top of things. So I mean, we got a lot of different real violent crime, serious crime type of things going on that we need our beds for, and they're being occupied by people with alcohol, drug problems, that the ones that the recidivism thing that you just mentioned are occupying a lot of those spaces, and it has been a problem for us.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't mean to go run on and on and on about that, but if you look across the country and watch what's happened with the growth of and the increase of methamphetamine and heroin use, we're no exception. The number of crimes that we have related to those, the cartels have reached every little nook and cranny of America. Their ability to be able to get those types of drugs into our community, affect our communities, is significant. And that has, when you're talking about the problems related to methamphetamine, and heroin use, you're also contributing to all of the other types of crimes. It increases everything else that's out there. Your violent assaults, your robberies, your burglaries, even your misdemeanor thefts. It's all connected. That's the nucleus of what some of the biggest problems are. And again, we run out of jail space. We're constantly running at capacity, and that's the same thing that's going on all across the country.
Wow, yeah. I mean, in Oklahoma City, we have a prison population as well, and they released quite a few inmates. I think late last fall, and so I don't know if they've been out long enough. The criminals have been, I don't know, be politically correct, but the former criminals that got released, I don't know the recidivism rate for repeat offenders. Yes, so I don't have an answer to that, but I do know that we have a population that's too populated for that overcrowding.
Yeah, and again, it's something that's common in communities all across this country. It's the overcrowding problem has oftentimes been addressed with wanting to increase and create new programs, alternative programs to put people back out on the streets. I'm not saying there's not people that can benefit from those. Anybody's capable of getting into a bad situation and making mistakes, but at least I have recognized some people that have taken advantage of those programs and now are utilizing those and saying, hey, I know I can get away with this because as soon as I go into court, all I have to say is that, and I'll be thrown into one of these programs. So there's not really a consequence for the actions. I think one of the biggest things we've gotten away from in this country is we call our jails detention centers or correctional centers. And I'm not saying it's not a good opportunity, a good place for corrective actions and try to help some people with some alternatives. But it's something to remember is that jails are also put in place, jails and prisons are also put in place to segregate dangerous people from our populations and to impose a punishment or a penalty for wrongdoing. Just like when you were a kid and got in trouble with your parents, you got grounded. It wasn't a corrective action, it was a punishment. You had to go to your room or you couldn't have your dinner, whatever it was in your household. It was a punitive action. It wasn't always just necessarily a corrective action. And we have gotten away from that, kind of forgotten about that.
That's actually a really solid point and well explained. I've been trying to think of a way to articulate that, and I think you just nailed it. Well done.
No, I've been doing this for a long time, and it's frustrating because you see a lot of people with good intentions trying to solve the problem and really just forgetting that there is an alternative purpose, and they try to be politically correct. Detention center, correctional facility, it's jail. Call it what it is. Let's go back to Monopoly. It's jail.
Yeah.
AAIL. I mean, it's jail. And one of the reasons that you're there is you did wrong. There's a penalty to pay. It's one of the interesting things that comes out of that documentary out of Seattle is that there's a state and a program in the Northeast that they really work off that principle and philosophy. They want to help people, and they've had some really high success rates. But one of the principles is they start with punitive action. Look, you did wrong. You have to pay your penance. You're gonna take your punishment first, and once that punishment is fulfilled, then we're going to go into the programs instead of starting with the programs and forgetting all about the punishment. It's like I said, and for a 1 hour program, it really puts things in perspective, and it's very accurate as to what you see going on across the country.
Right on. Earlier you talked about the security detail. You got to work with Secret Service agents, and you got to work detail for Bernie Sanders, and then of course President Trump. Did you ever get to meet Bernie Sanders in person and shake his hand, and President Trump?
I did, in both cases. In fact, when the primaries were starting early this year, and Bernie was the front runner, I had two pictures saved on my phone side by side because I would flip them back and forth saying that in a matter of 2 years, I was standing with Bernie by his airplane, and I was, after President Trump did one of his rallies here in Missoula, I had an opportunity to meet and speak with him for a few minutes. So I had those two photos side by side, and it was kind of a fun talking point that within the last couple of years, I've got to meet both of these candidates. I think Bernie since fallen off and probably is out of that, but it was fun to talk about while it was going on.
Yeah, with President Trump, there was his presence. I mean, when you talked to him, was it pretty strong, pretty confident?
You know, I guess there were a couple of things that I was very surprised by. I'm 6'2". I'm not a small guy by any means. You might think so on Live PD because everybody I work with is anywhere from 6'10" to 6'6". I look like the little guy all the time, but I'm not little. And I was seeing him on TV and over the years on different things. I did not expect him. He's taller than I am. The president's probably between 6'3" and 6'4". His presence is not what you see on TV. What I had an opportunity to do is I just thanked him for his support in law enforcement. Like him, love him, hate him, whatever your stance is on the president, he's a strong supporter of law enforcement, and that's really what I had the opportunity to talk to him. That's what I wanted to say to him is to thank him for the support and thank you for having our backs when maybe necessarily the mainstream media doesn't. And I don't mean to slam them. I mean, they're in business. They're looking for what it is that's going to sell newspapers or bring interest to them. You're not going to see on the 6 o'clock news every night about some cop who did his job every day on a routine matter. They're looking for the shock factor. But in the course of my conversation with him, when I just said I would like to extend some gratitude and say thank you and how much we appreciate your support and your constant communication and support for law enforcement. You're a vocal advocate for law enforcement, and I mean it was in a very sincere way. He looked at me and says, "And I'm not going to stop." And it was. He's been accused a lot of not being very presidential, but in that moment, he was very presidential to me. I thought the world of a guy just for saying those things.
That's awesome. I don't know as far as the quote unquote what presidential looks like. My thought is, as long as the president has our back as a CEO of our country, and he's doing what he's feel like to protect us as a whole, then that's presidential to me.
Yeah, somebody once recently said to me, "Have you ever won a political argument?" And it made me think. No, I really haven't. So I mean, we all have different sides and we all have different beliefs, and I respect the beliefs of others. My dad and we couldn't be any more opposite politically, and it's constant friction between us. And after that person said to me, "Have you ever won a political argument?" I decided at that point that I'm no longer going to have these debates with my dad. We can have discussions and have discussions about, but I'm not going to change his mind. He's not going to change mine. It's politics is one of those tough things. It's very rare that somebody's going to change your mind through argument or through debate on political issues.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree that it's not going to change their mind. I'm always just curious to hear different perspectives of whether it's a liberal perspective, conservative perspective. I'm just curious to hear the back and forth. So, but that's for another podcast.
No discussion of religion or politics, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to, this is your show. You're more than welcome to talk about it. I'll listen.
Well, say about politics related to law enforcement. You see, I'm not speaking for all of law enforcement, but you'll see more conservative ideologies supported in law enforcement. And I think it really kind of goes all the way back to what we were talking about related to having consequences for actions. Police officers are out there, sheriff's deputies, state troopers are out there on a daily basis, working their tails off to make their communities safe. And it's a pretty frustrating thing to work a case from beginning to end, put together a really good case and present it to a prosecutor, just to have them decline prosecution because the jails are too full, or to have a really good case and see something, a really sweet plea agreement come out. And those, a lot of, again, I'm not saying that's all a liberal ideal, but a lot of those things fall onto that side of politics. And so you can kind of feel that division and divide in law enforcement. You see a lot of law enforcement officers, at least in my experience, falling on the more conservative side of things and having a more conservative view. I certainly believe that's the case for me, that my job and my career has shaped my political beliefs, and it's always been the more conservative side of things that I thought would not just serve me, but benefit our communities and what we're trying to do as law enforcement officers and keeping our community safe.
Yeah, no, I get it. And I'm with you. For me, it's basic and it's simple. Don't break the rules and don't break the laws, and you'll be fine.
Great line out of Liar Liar.
I've never seen the movie, but that's what they said.
Yeah, well, it's Jim Carrey. Yeah, look it up. It's Liar Liar. It's you paraphrase it, but that's basically what he said.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, because that's what my mom and dad would always say. I mean, don't break the rules, don't break the laws. I mean, then you won't get in trouble. You'll be fine.
It's a pretty safe bet and a pretty good philosophy to follow.
Yeah. So let's move on to your personal life a little bit. Just like, what are a couple things that no one really knows about Captain Burt?
When I was younger, growing up, one of the things one of my passions living in Montana, and going out with my dad as a young kid and even a teenager, I was an avid hunter. We have three different types of seasons if you want to talk about birds. But I was really an avid archery hunter. I was an archery hunter before archery hunting was popular. Did a lot of, after the archery season, there's a big game rifle season. And I used to really enjoy that. I enjoyed that with my dad and my brothers and friends for years. I still am not opposed to hunting. I still like to get out. I still like to interact with wildlife. One of the things that happened to me probably about 10 or 12 years ago is I really just personally lost an interest for, I'm not opposed to people hunting, but personally I lost the desire to ever kill anything that I don't absolutely need to kill. If I had to go fend for myself and get a meal, I know I would know how to do it, and I would know where to do it. I think as a result of, I lost my mom in a very tragic way. And about the same time, I became a coroner and started dealing with a lot of issues surrounding death and surrounding loss. And, I all of a sudden I had a different, changed my values a little bit. Again, for a third time, I don't oppose it. I'm not bagging on people who enjoy that as an activity. But for me, the thrill of that, of killing something that I don't need to kill, disappeared. Having said that, I love the outdoors. It doesn't, and this is where I'm kind of a conservative. People ask me what I like to do. I like to burn dead dinosaurs. I'm a fossil fuel user. I like my ATVs. I like my boats. I like motorcycles. I have a Harley Davidson motorcycle. I have side by sides, a four wheeler. and my biggest passion, the thing that I love more than all of that, I would give up everything else, is backcountry snowmobiling. It is the closest thing to flying that you can possibly imagine without leaving the ground. To get back in a place where you can't imagine anybody else has ever been, especially in some of these mountain peaks in Montana, where you can see 100 miles in every direction. There is a place that I have where I can see 5 different mountain ranges that are all about 100 miles away, and it's there. You could not really get there very easily. I don't think you could get there on a horse in the summer. These are, the cliffs and the peaks and things are filled up with snow and create slopes and ways to get into there that it would be very difficult to do. And so it provides an opportunity to see God's creation in a way that is, unless you have a pilot's license and can do it from a helicopter and airplane, it is something that's pretty unique.
Yeah, man, that sounds awesome. Sounds really cool.
It's incredible.
What are a couple questions that you wish people would actually ask you, but no one ever asked?
Oh boy, I wish this one was something you would have prepped me with. I don't know that I've ever really been hit with something or wanted to express something that I haven't been able to express in some way, shape, or form. I've had lots of questions about it. Funniest calls, worst calls, most unique calls, and it's hard to answer those questions in this job, because things that I might find funny might not necessarily be funny to. They're going to strike people in a different manner, and I think a lot of people have heard about things like heard the term black humor. There's a lot of that in law enforcement. It's a way to deal with stress and anxiety over things. Things that I might find funny might not necessarily be funny to somebody who works in a pharmacy. It's. I think here's one that I'll share that I think that somebody once asked me what was my very favorite excuse for somebody that was speeding, and I stopped a guy that was he was in excess of the speed limit by double. He was like 70 and a 35. And it took me a while to catch up with him and get him stopped. And as I was approaching the vehicle, it was an older 70s model Chevy pickup truck. And if anybody remembers those, the rocker panels on the doors, that's kind of the era of truck that I was driving when I was in high school. If you spilled a beer in there, it went right through the rocker panels and out the door. And so as I was approaching the vehicle, I could see that there was liquid pouring out through the vehicle. I'm thinking, this guy just dropped his beer and he's got his beer down by the door and it spilled, and I'm thinking probably a DUI. As I'm approaching the vehicle and got up alongside, he just laid out and as sincerely and as mortified as he could possibly look. He said, "I'm sorry, sir. I'm just trying to get home. My colostomy bag broke." And I never spent a second even questioning that. I was like, carry on. If that was a true story and it happened, I did the right thing. If it was something he was just telling me to get out of the ticket, that was absolutely probably one of the best excuses that anybody could have come up with.
Wow, I've never heard that one. So that one wins. What makes you seem really mellow and even keeled? Does anything ever tick you off?
Mm-hmm. I think early in my career, frustrations with people who are simply just refuse to follow the rules, or somebody who wants to get in my face, or even the face of a fellow deputy who is just doing his job. I could get my ire up a little bit. What I've learned over the years, and I started in 1992, is that as soon as you lose that bit of control, as soon as your ire gets to a point where you've lost control of your voice command and and your presence, they've won. You start to become angry, you start to become mad. Physiological things happen. Certain amounts of auditory exclusion start to occur. Vision starts to narrow down, and you're not so aware of your surroundings. Just a couple of things that I've utilized over the years to just break that, because you can feel it happen. Walk up to a window and have somebody crack their window about 2 inches and start handing their license through the window and doing these techniques to frustrate law enforcement. And then just to take a step back, take a breath, and and just recognize what it is that people are trying to do, what they're trying to draw you in and trap you into doing. It's if you fall into that trap, man, you're letting them win. Some of the other things, people that hurt kids, people that are hurting kids, man, you just can't let your emotions overcome what you're doing when you're dealing with people that are hurting animals or hurting kids. You just have to try to deal with it and take a step back. If you feel yourself starting to become angry or ticked off about something, to take a step back and not make an ass out of yourself, not let them win. I can think of one particular thing that happened on Life PD where a couple of people hit a deer out in the road, totally disabled their car. The deer got up, ran away. It was limping around the other side of the road. And I was looking for the deer to make sure that it didn't end up back. It was something I was sure I was going to have to put down. And I was making sure that it didn't end up back up on the roadway. I was utilizing some lights and had some guy pull up coming in the opposite direction. He obviously knew I was law enforcement because of the lights, and he's screaming profanities at me about the lights. I was mad. And initially, based on what he slowed down, stopped in the middle of the roadway, created a hazard, and is using screaming profanities at the cops for trying to keep. And so that made me mad. I immediately spun around, went to chase him down, made a traffic stop, and was able to utilize some of the exercises to just calm myself. Walked up and started talking to him, but utilized some of the exercises just in some of the experience just to not let him make an ass. I didn't let him use his actions to make an ass out of me. And so simply had a conversation with him. I had every intention of writing some tickets. It does constitute disorderly conduct in the state of Montana. It's not a free speech issue. Stopping in the flow of traffic in the passing lane on a freeway was another reason to stop him. But being able to just keep calm, have a conversation with him, somebody who was mad at me a few minutes ago, if I had approached him and we got into a big screaming match about what's right and what's wrong, nothing would have got accomplished. He would have got some tickets. He would all have been found guilty, and he had lost some money out of his wallet. Right. Instead, I took it as an opportunity to stay calm, make it a positive experience. In the end, he's shaking my hand and saying, "You know what? I'm sorry. That was totally uncalled for." And then I think the final thing I can say to answer that question is remember that we've all had bad days. Usually when law enforcement is getting called to any scene, a domestic or dealing with problems with your kids or marital issues, whatever it happens to be, having a mindset going in that these people are really having a difficult time right now. And you might be dealing with somebody who's emotionally is a little bit amped up right now, and just trying to bring people back down to a level of conversation where you're not trying to control the situation through force or fear of force or trying to. Nothing ever gets accomplished that way. Nobody wins in those situations. So I think a lot of it is just experience and knowing over the years what kind of things have worked and have not worked. But I also think it's a little bit of the culture here in Missoula that we're not, and in Montana, that you're not going. People here are very self-sufficient, very they take care of themselves. You get in their face, they're going to get back in your face, and it's just going to escalate. It doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
Long answer. I'm sorry, but there's a lot to that question.
No, that's good. And the traffic stop, you were able to gather yourself, then this guy that got pulled over gathered himself because of you, and now he's probably passed that on forward. So I mean that's awesome that you were able to do that for him.
There's a funny spinoff of that is we never. It turned out to be a very positive contact, but some of these First Amendment groups have contacted our office since then and tried to create a problem and how it was an illegal stop on my behalf. It's a First Amendment issue. People can swear at the cops, and well, it's pretty simple, and it's pretty well spelled out in statute in the state of Montana that you can't use loud, abusive, and profane language in public, and it's not necessarily a free speech issue. And the other issue that they didn't even consider before making their complaint is this man brought his vehicle to a near stop on a U.S. highway in a 65 mile an hour zone to be able to stop and start swearing at the police. It goes way beyond disorderly conduct. What he's doing is reckless and it's endangering the public. He simply cannot do what he was doing. But it did create a bit of a spin-off. And those are I guess trolls. Those are the kind of some of the things that. But it's been very little. There's very little negative that's gone on in his life. The positive has been exponentially higher number. I'd say you get 25 or 30, and maybe even more, upwards of 50 positive comments for every negative comment that's out there. It was that whole experience was good for all of us.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And also on the First Amendment, they say it's you got the freedom of speech, etc. And obviously in Montana, you guys have a part of that where it's like, well, hold on a second. But at the end of the day, if you there's an unwritten rule of respect, and just be respectful on your freedom of speech, if you will. You're going to say something.
Yeah, and in that particular case, if somebody wants to call me a name or swear at me or do whatever because they think my lights are too bright or whatever, I'm not going to take that too personal. It was the context in which he did it. Right. There's these people on the side of the road who just went through a traumatic experience. There's other motorists that are on the roadway, and he's stopping and yelling and screaming. What about their rights? What about why should they have to be exposed to his profanity? I shouldn't be able to, whether I'm a law enforcement or acting as a private citizen. Why should I be able to go out and use speech that's inflammatory and angry to offend others? And that whole free speech issue is a slippery slope. You don't want to. I believe in our Constitution. What's interesting in Montana is we have a lot of the Montana Constitution is more restrictive than the U.S. Constitution. There are more rights granted in the Montana Constitution than there are in the U.S. Constitution. It's more restrictive to law enforcement and more liberal to citizens of Montana. You'll see all across the country on live PD where people are doing probable cause searches. Cops are doing probable cause searches of vehicles. It's developed from something called the Carroll Doctrine. We can't do that here because of the heightened expectation of privacy that our Constitution requires. If we're going to see something there, we have to take some extra steps. We're usually requiring a warrant or consent. And consent is, again, it's got to be clear, a clear consent as to what our intent is and what their rights are before a consent is given. So Montana is, I really appreciate that. I like that about our state. I believe in the Constitution. That's why I do this job. It's my guideline. It's my rule book, so to speak. And so I'm not out there trying to violate anybody's free speech. I'm not trying to violate anybody's Fourth Amendment rights or 14th. We're not out there trying to violate people's rights. We're just trying to keep people safe and keep them following the rules.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like you obviously know your rules and laws, and you're really sharp because you have this. I feel like you have a sharp mindset. So, with that being said, what are some of your habits that help sharpen your mindset?
I don't know that I really have any of those anymore. As a younger guy, I liked to stay studying Montana codes. We just acronym is MCA. I mentioned disorderly conduct earlier. Disorderly conduct is a very common statute, and it's something that was a law that's it's broad and it's kind of a catch-all and captures a lot of different things. But having worked in law enforcement in Montana, my first part of my career was in Idaho, but the vast majority of my career has been in Montana. Um, uh, uh, Recognizing and rereading some of those criminal statutes, you can. It's amazing that even today, I can have a new situation come up and see how that statute can apply where I never considered it before. The other thing that I can say about that is that staying up on case law. You have the Montana Supreme Court, you have the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court that are laws of the land are the law is something that's alive. It's constantly evolving based on. Oh well, look what we're going through right now with COVID. There have been, and this is not criminal, so this is more on the civil side of things, but just as an example, there have been so many HIPAA laws, and everybody's been so afraid of HIPAA for the last however many years that you can't get a healthcare facility to tell, even though they're allowed to, you can't get them to tell a coroner what kind of conditions a person had that might have contributed to their death, which is statutorily required for them to do because they're so afraid of HIPAA. But look at what COVID and coronavirus has done. Not in every state, not in every community, but in a lot of different places, especially like in Montana, where HIPAA kind of went out the window a little bit with this, and we're more concerned with the public health crisis than we are. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with the HIPAA issues later on. If our health department, and it's not just us, but this is becoming kind of a trend in different places, where if there's a new exposure, a new positive test that's coming out, they're going to start sharing that information with incident management teams and law enforcement to find out, have our first responders been in contact with this person? Have they been exposed? And do we need to start taking steps to start screening those folks? And so that's just an example I can think of where current issues require laws to change. And we see it happen in all aspects, both criminal and civil. And it's happened. It's happened since our Constitution came into existence.
Yeah. Speaking of COVID-19, how are you dealing with it as far as maybe yourself and then as a sheriff's office?
Well, we're very fortunate, and I say that we're close to Seattle, but it's not like we're right next door. But I mean, it's our closest major city.
Right.
And really, when the coronavirus hit this country, Seattle was one of the places that was immediately dealing with the crisis. I live in a very proactive community as far as not just our law enforcement, but our health department and having incident management teams in place. Mentioned the health department, our county commissioners, the sheriff, his command staff, and the support services staff. So when we saw things starting to happen, we immediately started following and figuring out what best practices were and paying attention to what the CDC was saying, and getting people in place for those things. As a result, they really talked earlier about doing what you can to flatten the curve, to keep your number of exposures. We know we're going to have exposures, but try to spread that out over a period of time as opposed to having them all at once.
Right.
And so we got on board really early on with getting our first responders practicing the social distancing, or not necessarily being right on top of each other, and using some practices, making sure that they had the personal protective equipment to protect themselves against with people that they're coming in contact with, utilizing changing schedules. I know with our command staff and our support services staff, they divided them up into halves and sometimes even quarters, to where if one segment that had to be at the office, had to be the places that were exposed, there was another section of people or another group of people that were either working from home or working remotely that were in a safer environment, that could fill in case something like that started to happen. As a result, and I think you get the picture, but as a result, the state of Montana, as of yesterday, had less than 225 positive cases, and that's with a population of just over 1 million people. There, in Missoula County, which is a population of about 119,000, there were 21 or 22 positive cases just in our county, and statewide, I think are I don't want to discount the horribleness of losing people to this horrible pandemic, but realistically, we've had, I think, 6 deaths as of yesterday, and so getting on top of this early and being proactive about it, and also having a community that was willing to help out the business owners. I mean, everybody suffered from this, right? I mean, restaurants. I mean, look at my hair. I haven't had a haircut in 6 weeks. My hair hasn't been this long in a long time. Everybody's suffering from a little bit, but with the cooperation of our local business owners and people keeping a personal distance from others, we've been pretty fortunate here in Missoula.
Man, that's awesome. I love hearing that. And you talk about the proactive steps and your leadership, the town's leadership, city's leadership, and then one of the most important pieces is a sense of community getting on board and doing that too.
And I'm just going to take an opportunity here. It'll probably embarrass him a little bit if he ever were to see this, but I just want to give a little plug to Sheriff McDermott. He's not the Lone Ranger in this sense. Most people who are either chiefs or sheriffs in this country at this time have never faced anything like this. They have never had to gear up for something like this. What I liked and appreciated about him is he took a very active role and made some really hard decisions early on about what we were going to do with our jail, how decisions that were not necessarily popular with our law enforcement partners about what kind of offenses we were going to book for. Right, wrong, or indifferent, he got out front of it. He made a decision, and it hasn't been in stone. He's been flexible and working as this issue has gone on, being either more flexible or more stringent based on what the needs are. Because the primary thing, we have to keep our detention officers safe. If this gets into our jails and all of a sudden we have about 110 detention officers, if all of a sudden we have 60 of them that are down sick, what do we do? I mean, right. I don't know how you replace them. So I hats off to him for getting on top of this and being a leader in our community and taking a role out front, leading from out front, and making some tough decisions that may not have been necessarily popular. Hats off to all law enforcement leaders, chiefs, sheriffs all over the country they weren't able to work off of other people's experiences, because nothing like this has ever happened in modern day law enforcement.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, hats off to law enforcement for sure. And you talk about the frontline doctors, nurses, truck drivers, agricultural department, supplying food. I mean, that supply chain, big.
Pretty significant, yeah. It's changed the way that just about everybody's operating.
Yeah. What's Captain Burt most proud of?
I have 2 boys. they're 23 and 20. They're successful in what they're doing. My oldest son's a detention officer, which might explain why I don't want bad things to happen over at the jail. I want him to stay healthy. My youngest son is going to school for mechanical engineering and has for the last year has been doing some work for NASA, including an internship at Huntsville. He's on the forefront of things, just being 20 years old and having a foothold on the world like he does.
Wow.
I'm super, super proud of both of them for their achievements as professionally, but it pales in comparison to how I feel for them, how proud I am of them, of the men that they are. I often say that these two kids, they've never caused me an ounce of trouble. All through school, they both worked hard through school. They never got a day of detention, never had complaints from teachers. They nothing but positive comments from coworkers or friends about what good kids they are, how polite they are. And bottom line is, those two boys have more character and integrity in their little finger than most people. Most people I know, they are good men, and I don't know that that's all due to me. In fact, it has a lot to do with their mom as well. But they are without a doubt my greatest accomplishment and the thing that I'm most proud of.
That's awesome. How does Captain Burt want to be remembered?
If I could trim it down to one word, introspective. I may not have always done things right, and I may not have always done things the right way, but I did come around, or I have come around and figured out a way to self-examine, who I am, the mistakes I made, and how to improve on myself as a person, whether it be as a son or a dad. Insert any relative title you want to there, and even as a law enforcement officer, I feel like I've used that to try to better myself in some areas. It took a little longer to come around than others, but it was. I'd like to be remembered as somebody who could reflect and be very honest with himself.
Man, I love it. This has been an amazing just hour or so for me to hear, just to be doing this podcast and listening to your testimony, your journeys, what you're proud of. I mean, I wish that maybe one day I'll get just come meet you sometime. That'd be awesome.
Or vice versa. I drove through Oklahoma not that long ago when I was moving my son down to Huntsville.
Oh, wow.
So nothing to say that I won't be doing that again in the future.
Okay. Well, if you do, please let us know, and we'll find a way to meet you somewhere and have lunch or breakfast or a coffee or something.
Well, other than that, I'm pretty easy to find around here, so it would be my pleasure. I'll take you to the depot for some prime rib.
Oh, I love it. But how far are you from Bozeman, by the way?
Drive time about 3.5 hours. So okay. It's roughly 210 miles.
Okay. I'm just asking because my father-in-law went to Montana Tech out in Bozeman or something like that. That's why I ask.
So Bozeman is home of the Montana State University.
Montana State. Okay.
Then Missoula is the University of Montana, both the state university systems. And then Montana Tech is in Butte, which is in between the two, which is where my youngest son, the rocket scientist, is actually enrolled in school.
That's awesome, because my father-in-law, he's a geophysicist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. 2 more questions. So the first one is, how do our followers and listeners get in touch with you? Like, no cell phone number, but email or Twitter, obviously.
Well, so our email is on I believe it's on our Missoula County website. It's the extension is all the same. It's for every deputy, every employee. Everything is at Missoula County, all spelled out .us. And then for whichever employee you might be looking for, it's their first initial last name. So mine happens to be bburt at missoulacounty.us. On Facebook, I'm at MCSD, which is for Missoula County Sheriff's Department 409 at gmail.com. That would be my personal address. That's all the way to find me on Facebook. And then just my name on Facebook. On Twitter, it's at Bill capitalized _Burt capitalized _409. The 409 is my badge number. I recently had a question about how those are established. Interesting fact is that Montana has 56 counties. When the counties were established, they were assigned numbers based on the size of the population. At the time, Missoula was number 4, and so that is the reason that our badges start with 4. It was the 4th largest population when the counties were established.
That's interesting. Your area code you called me from is 406.
Yes.
And Oklahoma's area code, Oklahoma City, is 405.
I know. I'm a big Street Outlaws fan, and so I watched 405 all the time.
Yeah. When you first called, I was like, 406, who's this? But then it says Montana, so I was like, oh, yeah, Captain Burt.
Yeah,
last question for you, Captain. Do you approve this podcast?
Say again?
This is the last question for you. Do you approve this podcast?
You know what? I've had a tremendous amount of fun doing this after such a stressful week and everything that's going on. And this has been something that's really helped me relax. I absolutely do. And I appreciate the opportunity to do this. This time has flown by.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. We'll get this all, not when we say edited, probably just compress the data, but as far as from the beginning to end, it was as awesome, as powerful, and as authentic. So I appreciate you, Captain.
Alexa, turn on light 2. Sorry, I'm losing light here.
Oh. Hey.
Starting to lose light pretty quickly. I meant to do that a bit ago, so. You have good light in your room. It started to get dark here.
Yeah, it got dark pretty quick around 7:49, 8 o'clock. So I turned on the backlight, podcasting light.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, we'll clean this data up, and then do you want to see us before we release it? Do you want to hear it before we release it?
No, whatever you end up doing, you're good. I don't think I called anybody any bad names or anything.
No. It was good. Well, thank you for your service, Captain. Appreciate you. You guys stay safe. Your whole department stay safe, and take care.
You too. Take care.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye.